Oh my goodness, Dr. Shawn, you are absolutely one of my favorite people. I cannot wait, cannot wait to chat with you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always great to talk to you, Dana.
Oh my gosh. You say, okay, I am obsessed with the mental fitness book and unpacking all of the things because when we talk about stress and overwhelm, it's just a place that we all live in on a daily basis. And you quote, stress is not necessarily you versus other things or other people, but it's you versus you.
Yeah, exactly. I've been studying stress for, 30 or so years now. And it still strikes me that so many people just think that stress is inevitable. That, hey, I live a stressful life. I don't get enough sleep. I've got a lot on my plate. That's very common for a lot of people. And they just go, well, I guess I'm just going to have to deal with stress. I'm going to have to deal with the downside of stress, right? Which is you're fatigued and you're in a bad mood and you're gaining weight and, and think, well, this is how it is. Like I'm stressed out. Everybody I know is stressed out and there's nothing I can do about it. So there,
right.
But we've learned a lot over the last 3 decades where I say to people a lot, like we can't necessarily control the stress that's out there, meaning out there in the world. There's always going to be that kind of stress, but you can definitely control the stress in here, like your stress response. What is your body going to do with that stress? Are you going to be able to navigate the stress? Are you going to be resilient? Can we improve your mood and your energy levels and keep you, thin and vibrant and young and, all the things.
Right. All the things. I remember when my husband died 10 years ago, if someone would have said to me, do you have stress resilience?
Mm-hmm.
I would have laughed in your face. Like, what are you even, what does stress resilience even mean? I feel like that's a term that we don't understand until we have it. Yeah, and once you have it, you're like, oh, this is what you're talking about. Being in a chaotic situation, potentially being on mental overload, but being able to show up for yourself. And you introduce this stress continuum, right? Where we talk about being at 1, 2, 3, where you're struggling.
Yeah.
Anxiety, depression, autoimmune or disorders and ADHD, or normal, which is, I think, where the majority of us resonate with brain fog, a little bit fatigued, a little bit bloated. You call it in your book, kind of chubby.
Yeah, and people just feel kind of blah when they're there, right? When you're in that middle zone, people feel blah. We actually have a term for it in positive psychology research. It's called languishing, right? You're not quite depressed, you're not quite having burnout, you're just kind of blah. You're not the opposite of languishing is something called flourishing, which is you have good energy and you have good mood and you have good resilience, which is your ability to sort of navigate that stressful situation. It's not that you're bulletproof against stress, but you are more effective in the face of stress. So another way to think of it is that you might have a stressful event happen, and if your resilience is low, you will literally say, I can't deal with this right now, and you will back away from the stress. You'll say, like, I'm out. Like,
oh my gosh, I have a funny story on that. Like, there are those closest to me, like when I was living in fight or flight, like years after my husband died. And when you say you're just like, peace out, I would get to a state of overwhelm and take a nap.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like I was 100% able to just shut it off because I couldn't think myself into a better solution.
Yes, exactly. But when your resilience is high, it's actually when we measure it either in the clinic or the laboratory, we measure something called cognitive flexibility. And so that is our way of measuring high resilience. It means that in a stressful situation, the same stressful situation that would cause you to say peace out before, now instead of stepping away from it, you can step into it and you have better strategy formation, you have better cognitive control, so you can come up with better solutions to whatever the stressful situation is. It like you're more effective in navigating that stressful situation. And that's what people want. Most of the people that I work with, they don't want me to lower their stress, right? That's a nice thing to have. They are usually busy people. They're usually, high achievers. They want to be more effective in a stressful situation because they're usually doing things that they like to do, right? They're building businesses, or they're building their family, or they have, they want to do their work and their hobby. And, they don't want to take something off their plate. Mm-hmm. They want to figure out a way to put something else on their plate so they can get more enjoyment out of life without, that thing being the last straw that broke the camel's back,
Right. And we talk about today, like you want to be in that place that's 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 on this scale of energized, sharp, resilient. You're lean and you feel amazing. But the reality of it, you have shared before and definitely in the book, is that 90% of the doctor visits are related to stress, right? Exactly. Stress creates a cascade of other effects on the body that make us go chasing symptoms.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And the symptoms might be that you're depressed, and then you go to the doctor and you're going to get an antidepressant. The symptom might be that you can't focus and you're bouncing around one thing to the next. And the solution at the doctor's office might be that you get an ADHD drug, or the solution is, or the symptom is that you're anxious and you're tense and you're irritable and you can't sleep. And then the solution, so-called solution is that you're going to get one of the sleep drugs, and this goes on and on and on. But sometimes that stress has sort of an indirect effect where it might be damaging your gut. And so if that stress is damaging your gut, then the thing that you might have a symptom of is an autoimmune system disease, which is directly related to leaky gut, which is directly related to your stress. And so all those autoimmune system drugs are among the highest selling drugs of all time. And it's like, I'm not an anti-pharmaceutical kind of a person, but if you're taking something that is not the right solution for that problem, if you're taking an autoimmune system drug to lower your immune system, for example, suppress your immune system, that's not solving your stress problem. It's not solving your leaky gut problem. It's not solving your inflammation problem. And so as a nutritional biochemist, I like to say to people, let's try to figure out what is the root of the problem. And a lot of that comes back to the gut these days, right? The science is telling us all about leaky gut and all about the microbiome, which are the bacteria in your gut that are making your neurotransmitters. So a lot of our natural therapies these days look at the gut first. We call it the second brain, but we can address it first. And if we balance it, people feel better in all of these ways that we just talked about.
Well, can you share more about leaky gut and how, like, you kind of so quickly shared, like, oh, it's leaky gut, and here are the reasons. Here are the reasons. Like, let's unpack why. Like, why is leaky gut? What is that? I can remember from my own personal story, when one of my little guys was young, I was told he has leaky gut. He couldn't, he had a hard time breastfeeding. He had a hard time with milk. He had a hard time with a lot of things, but I was never given a solution. Like, here's the problem, go find a solution. And I now recognize that he was on a lot of, amoxicillin, those antibiotics. Like, I was struggling for the word, a lot of antibiotics, a lot of other things that I think contributed to that. But can you share why? Like, what's the science behind that?
Yeah. So, and the science is really new on leaky gut. It used to be, I remember a time when I, back in graduate school days, where we would kind of poo-poo the idea of leaky gut because you couldn't really measure it, and you couldn't really, there wasn't a drug that could treat it, right? So one of these things where medical people didn't care about it because there was no treatment, there was no pill you could take, and scientific people didn't care about it because it was very difficult to measure. But you fast forward, 30 or so years, and now we can measure it, we can see the symptoms, we have treatments for it, natural treatments, and you can see a resolution of those symptoms. People get better in, all these different ways. So if you think of your gut lining as a piece of saran wrap, right? It really is one cell layer thick. It's thin, thin, thin. And that's by design, so that we can absorb our food and our nutrients, and they can go into our bloodstream, and we can get nourishment out of our food right across this gut lining. But think about that line of saran wrap. If it has one little nick in it, then something that's supposed to stay in the gut will literally leak across into the circulation. And if that's a food particle, or it's a bacteria that shouldn't be there, or it's anything that shouldn't be in the bloodstream, the immune system reacts to that. The immune system attacks it as if it's an invading pathogen, that we're getting this big infection. And so the way that the immune system attacks that thing is by increasing inflammation. So, it makes sense, like step by step by step, when we think of it that way. Oh, you have this little pinhole in your gut lining, and that could be caused by processed food, could be caused by antibiotics, it could be caused by food additives. There's a whole number of things, including stress, including menopause, including pregnancy, including hormone fluctuations. All sorts of things can cause those little pinholes, those leaks in your gut. But then your immune system kicks off, and your inflammatory cascade kicks off. And then if your immune system is starting to attack your brain, that's going to be a problem. If it's starting to attack your mucus linings or your joint linings, or et cetera, that's where the symptoms of a leaky or of an autoimmune system problem come. But we can trace them all the way back biochemically, saying, well, you're overinflamed. Well, your immune system is in disarray. Well, you have a leaky gut. So let's go down to the lowest level possible, which is, let's solve the leaky gut problem. Let's close up those holes. And there's all kinds of ways we can do that naturally with berries, with citrus fruit, with the right dietary supplements in terms of probiotics and fibers and things like that. So if leaky gut is this underlying root cause, but it's not something that we're chasing, right? Because it's not something that when you go to the doctor because you're stressed, like back to the point that 90% of the doctor visits are related to stress, you go because you're stressed and you get prescribed a medication, whether it's for ADHD or it's for depression or it's for anxiety, and then you go along your way. How do you know that leaky gut is part of it? Who helps with that? Yeah. So leaky gut is one of these sort of like silent conditions, right? It's not a disease per se, but it's one of these conditions where your gut lining is out of balance, and that's leading to all of these different problems. But if you go and you get an ADHD drug or an anxiety drug or an antidepressant drug or whatever, that might change how you feel. It might change your symptoms. So if you're sad, an antidepressant will make you less sad. It's not going to make you happy, and it's surely not going to do anything at the level of the gut. Same thing for
I feel like say that again for the people in the back. It's not going to make you happy. It's going to make you less sad.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction, is that the reason antidepressants are on the market, right? And they should be on the market, right? They serve a very important role, which is if someone is suicidal, right? They are so sad, they want to end it all. An antidepressant drug can make them feel less sad. So they don't feel good. They don't feel happy. They don't feel, certainly don't feel the way they want to feel. They just feel less bad. And if they feel less bad, that hopefully is going to put them in a place where they're not going to take their own life, and that they can have a little bit of like a breather to say, okay, now I need to figure out what's going on here, right? The antidepressant is not the solution. It is a last, like, break glass emergency button kind of a thing that you would only take for a short period of time in order to, try to figure out what the real problem is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then when we start talking about the short term, though, I think therein lies part of the issue, because it's not taken as a short-term solution, right? It's prescribed as a short-term solution, but you see a lot of that we're not educated around this. We're just not educated.
We're on those drugs now for decades, right? And what happens is they feel sort of, blah for decades. And someone says, this is no way to go through my life. I need to get off this thing. And they try to get off, and they find that they can't. Because
why is that?
They're stuck. Because your body, those drugs, after changing your neurochemistry for so long, now your brain and your body is unable to make those neurotransmitters the way that they're supposed to. So, maybe some of your listeners might know or might not know, most of the neurotransmitters are made in your gut. That's why we talk so much about the gut as an important aspect of your overall mental wellness, because 90% of your serotonin for happiness is made in your gut. 70% of your dopamine, 50% of your GABA that helps us relax, but also most of our melatonin that helps us sleep, most of our oxytocin that helps us connect with other people. All that stuff is made in the gut. And
so when you're taking an antidepressant, so like help me understand this. So when you're taking the antidepressant, it is helping you feel less bad, right?
Yep.
But how is that functioning? How is that working in the gut to disrupt the gut's natural production of serotonin?
Yeah, so this might get a little complicated if I can't kind of show it in a graphic. But your nerves, one side of your nervous system will make serotonin, the other side will receive and respond to that serotonin. Where those antidepressant drugs work is in between. They work in that handoff. Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily have you make more serotonin. They slow your uptake, or they slow the reuptake of that serotonin. So you're still going to make serotonin and your body's still going to respond to it. But what these drugs do is they slow the metabolism of that serotonin or dopamine or whatever we're talking about. They're called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So what they're doing is they're interfering with your neurotransmitter metabolism so that neurotransmitter stays around longer. And so you do that for 2 weeks, fine. Your body can recover from that. You do that for 2 years or 2 decades, and you're really interfering with the whole metabolic cascade, and your body basically loses the ability to do it itself. Your body forgets how to do it, how to produce it, how to take it up, how to not take it up. And so it's like you're throwing a chemical monkey wrench in there, and it's not a good long-term thing.
Right. But so in doing that, how can we overcome that? So if I've been on an SSRI for 10 years and the research has shown, I can't remember where you shared this, if it's in your book or somewhere else, the research has shown the effects of that SSRI for what, 2 to 4 weeks, 2 to 6 weeks?
Well, they're typically supposed to be prescribed for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, just short term, just enough time to find out what the real root cause of the person's problem is, right? So they really are these short term Band-Aids. That's what they were developed for, but they're, like you said, they're certainly not being used that way.
No, they're not being used that way. So how can we overcome this? How can we help? So I've been on an SSRI as an example for 8, 9, 10 years. Can we unpack the side effects that you might be experiencing because of being on that SSRI for so long?
Yeah. So the biggest side effects is that you just stop getting enjoyment out of anything, right? So they help you, like we talked about before, they help you feel less bad, but in doing so, they help you feel less of anything. And so your happiness isn't going to be as good. The things you used to get enjoyment out of, like your hobbies and your family and things like that, are also just kind of flattened. It's like throwing a wet blanket over everything. It throws a wet blanket over your sadness, but it also throws a deadening over all the things that bring enjoyment out of life. So, and
how does that disrupt your gut function? Because I know that you've shared before that the SSRIs, because it's messing with your serotonin production, and it's creating other gut issues that you might be experiencing.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just SSRIs that do this. There have been some really good studies over the last few years to show that most medications, whether they're heartburn medications or blood pressure medications or psychiatry medications like antidepressants or anti-anxieties and those sorts of things, they have an effect at the level of the microbiome. Really, anything that you eat is going to eventually get to your microbiome and have a positive effect or a detrimental effect. And these drugs are synthetic chemicals. So the microbiome does not do very well with synthetic chemicals. We know it for drugs, but we also know it for food additives and artificial sweeteners and, all that kind of stuff. So, if like this is new thinking, most people out there who are listening to this don't know that your gut is the primary source of all these neurotransmitters. And if we're throwing processed junk into the gut, we're interfering with that neurotransmitter process.
So what can we do for ourselves? Like, we're all eating more processed food than we need to, potentially taking an SSRI or antidepressant or any pharma, something that's disrupting the way that our gut microbiome works and leaving us chasing other symptoms.
Right.
Now we're not sleeping really that well. Nope. So I'm looking to the next thing. How do we break the cycle in the easiest way possible to rebuild that gut function?
Yeah. So all this complicated science really comes down to a very simple solution, which is, on the one hand, you need to take away the things that are causing the damage, right? So, that's where we educate people about, going to a Mediterranean diet, or in the book, the mental fitness diet, so they can eat nutrients, like good nutrients that can actually do good things for the gut versus bad nutrients like processed food that are doing bad things to the gut. But then we can also go in and say, you know what? There are specific aspects of nutrition, like probiotic bacteria, like prebiotic fibers, like, if you're not going to eat the berries, I can at least give you the flavonoids in a dietary supplement from the berries that are going to help your gut. So there's like an aspect of take away the bad stuff, but then put in more of the good stuff. And I always say to my students, what do you think is the most effective thing to do? Are you going to, when you graduate here with your nutrition degree, are you going to go out there in the world and you're going to tell everyone that you're counseling to never eat bad food again? Or are you going to tell them to eat good food? And the moral of the story is that it's easier for a lot of people to add a good thing than it is for them to take away a bad thing.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with that part of habits. Like I've been binging a lot of other books on habits and how to create more habits. And the moral of any story to pivot toward you investing in yourself to say, all right, today I'm going to make one step to be better. It is 1,000,000% easier to add a habit than it is to take it away. And I think you and I can crawl down a rabbit hole of like taking things away raises cortisol and it increases stress and it makes it all totally worse. But rather than doing that for right this moment, like adding that habit. And if you're listening and you want an easy next step toward changing your eating habits, and Dr. Shawn has said this in his book, and I cannot agree more. It's not a diet, because a diet implies that that's something you're going to do for a short period of time in hopes of having a different outcome. But if you're looking for a different eating pattern, you can go to danalewis.com/cheat sheet and steal my free guide that walks you through this mental fitness diet with examples, with links, with all the things. Go grab that. It's free. But if we come back to this conversation about making a change, adding healthy habits, and we all are aware of probiotics, and sometimes we're like, oh, there's prebiotics and there's phytobiotics and all these things. And it sounds just like nerdy science. Unpack that. Unpack the why for those.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, you would have somebody who is never touching processed food, right? No sodas, no donuts, no cupcakes, none of the fun stuff, right? Ever. And they would always be eating lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. Here we're talking like 15 to 20 servings of fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats, all that kind of stuff, right? That world doesn't.
I don't know that person.
Exactly. That's another planet somewhere that is not planet Earth, right?
So back to reality. What can we do for today?
So back to reality. It's not to say that we can give someone a supplement and it's going to prevent the need for them to eat a good diet, right? It's not like that. It's not saying, hey, eat all these processed foods and just take this pill and you'll be back on an even keel. It doesn't work that way. But what we can do is we can say, let's give somebody a supplement of flavonoids or polyphenols, right? That they would normally get in an orange or in a handful of berries or something like that. Let's give them some specific fibers that can nourish their microbiome that they would normally get in a bowl of beans or a bowl of oatmeal or something like that, right? So it's not that the supplement's replacing that good food, but what we see is that biochemically you get the benefit. So your inflammation goes down or your microbiome goes up or whatever the case may be. And you feel better as a result of that supplement. And because you feel better, what we see in our trials is that now someone's appetite is better. So, and their cravings are lower and they're not getting stress eating signals. And now they're choosing a better diet. Or their energy is higher and their motivation is higher and they're more inclined to go and be physically active, right? So the supplement is sort of it's almost like a Trojan horse in a way, where we give that to somebody and it changes their behavior because they feel so much better because of what's happening across their gut-brain axis.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the stress signals, because that's real. Like the stress signals, when your stress is high, that cortisol hormone is high, you crave fatty foods, you crave carbohydrates, and you're not crazy. It's an actual craving. And then a lot of times what happens is then we shame ourselves because we're like, oh, why do I have to have this pizza? Now I've had the pizza. I'm a terrible person. I'm this. And you go on this spiral downward.
It's this vicious cycle. Yeah.
Right. So adding the probiotics, adding the supplement helps to break that cycle by giving your gut the nutrients that it needs. And a lot of times, like, let's unpack probiotics, because we're all like, oh yeah, I'm on a probiotic. And I love that you say in your book, you're like, well, you wouldn't go to the store and just ask for a vitamin and buy a bottle of something just randomly labeled vitamins without knowing what was in it. So when you're talking about probiotics and how probiotics can make the change, and you're alluding to the prebiotics with the beans and the bananas and the asparagus and the flavonoids and all that stuff, let's unpack how that works and how you can actually make a change.
Yeah. So, when we talk about probiotics, so where should I start with this? Like the supplement world is a big world, right? You go into a GNC, or you go into your local health food store, or you even go to the grocery store these days, and there's a huge supplement section. It can be really daunting for people, right? Especially if you're looking for sort of generic things, right? Like probiotics is a good example. You go to the probiotics section and there's going to be 100 different choices. And there's a terminology that we use when we're trying to educate people about probiotics. It's called probiotic strain specificity. And it's this idea that specific strains of bacteria do very specific things. So let's go back to your vitamin comment you just made. Vitamin A does something completely different than vitamin E, and that does something completely different than vitamin D, right? They're all important, but for completely different reasons. So probiotics are the same way. We might have one strain that lowers your stress and another strain that solves your constipation, right? Those are completely different effects that are strain dependent. And so the kinds of strains that I write about in the book, sometimes these days are called psychobiotics, because one strain might lower stress, one strain might lower depression, one strain might lower anxiety. Those are all ones that are going to help you feel better, but they're different ways of feeling better. And what you have to do is, like, that's not something that every probiotic is going to do, only the specific strains. And so, not to make it any more complicated, but the companies that sell the psychobiotic strains go out of their way to tell you, this one does this one does this, here's the clinical research, all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to necessarily be like a scientific detective to find these kinds of things. No, and we'll segue right into sharing Happy Juice, which is my favorite way to take these psychobiotics. And I will rewind, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I was at the grocery store looking at the wealth of probiotics. I knew that probiotics were good for you. So I was like, well, which one? And I literally thought in my mind that what would be a good idea would be just to rotate. Like, I'm going to get this one for this month, and then I'm going to get that one for next month. I have no idea what it's doing for me, but I feel like this is something I should be doing. And I associate. It makes sense, right? Like, sort of a diversity of these things is probably better than any one alone, right? But it's also like, I can't go back and share the result that I was getting from any one of those probiotics. Right. I think all of the strains that I was taking, or that most of us know about, is we're like, okay, probiotics. Yeah. Okay. I use the bathroom. It's pretty normal. Like, I'm good on probiotics. And I had no idea that psychobiotics were a thing, and that you could help yourself so easily. So let's unpack the strains of my favorite beverage. If you've been on this podcast, I talk about it all the time. Happy Juice is my jam. It's the thing that it's my go-to. And I truly attest it to helping me get from that scale of 1 to 10, the 5, 6, 7, meh. I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I'm a little bit anxious. I'm going to take a nap because I need to peace out on life. 2, 9, 10, 12, flourishing with energy, feel amazing. So let's share this easy
like, can you share the details of this easy solution?
Yeah. So Happy Juice starts with psychobiotics, right? So that's sort of the core, the secret sauce, if you will. Happy Juice has a blend of 3 specific psychobiotic strains that do stress and mood and resilience and all that kind of stuff. But it's not as much as you and I were just sort of geeking out about the microbiome and the gut and things like that. When we talk about overall mental wellness or mental fitness, it's not just the gut. It's not just the microbiome. It really is, when we talk about the gut-brain axis, it really is a system. And so what we wanted to do with Happy Juice is say, let's absolutely do something at the level of microbiome, because that's the cutting edge of science right now. So we have to address that. But let's also make sure we solve the gut integrity issue, right? Leaky gut that we talked about a few minutes ago.
Because that has so many just underlying issues that you're helping by healing, by helping to support leaky gut. And if you guys want to like jump the podcast and get online and look at it, it's danalewis.com/happy juice. You can nerd out while you're listening to this podcast. But yes, let's continue.
Yeah. So you have to do something for the microbiome. You have to do something for your leaky gut. You have to do something for the immune system, and your inflammation and your blood flow and your neurotransmitters in your brain, right? It's we don't want to say the brain isn't important anymore, even though most of the neurotransmitters are made in the second brain. So let's make sure the brain is activating the right neural pathways and getting the right level of blood flow and oxygen and all that kind of stuff. So if we want to feel our best, there's things we do in the gut. There's things we do in the brain. There's things we do in the axis, which is the immune system and the circulatory system and the nervous system. So if you think of that whole system as like optimizing the signaling across that system, that's what Happy Juice does. And that's why it works so well for people. They're like, why does this work as well as it does? And why am I a 10 now and I was a 5 before on that scale? Like it's not because of any one of those. It's not that the microbiome is the most important or the neurotransmitters in the brain are the most important. They're all important because like the weakest link in the chain kind of an idea.
I love that. And I love that it's doing more than one thing. So when you come back to the probiotics and you're standing in the grocery store, like, which one do I pick? And you pick one, it's going to help with one thing.
Right.
But what this drink is doing is helping with all of the things. And you said this, but let's talk about it for another minute with the immune system, because 70% of your immune system is in your gut.
Right.
So this is helping your gut brain connection, but let's unpack how that affects your immune system.
Yeah, so your immune system these days we think of as having 2 main functions. So everyone who's listening understands that their immune system protects them from the world around them, right? From viruses and bacteria, and even your immune system protects you from cancer. Your immune system is a shield, right, to keep you healthy. Your immune system, though, is also a communication organ. One of the things that it does, and one of its primary roles in the body, is that it helps the gut and the brain talk to each other. So you already mentioned 70% of your immune system is in your gut. Well, why is it in your gut? It's there to talk to your microbiome. So your microbiome cells, your bacteria, and your immune system cells are talking to each other millisecond by millisecond, and they get information from each other. The microbiome learns about what the rest of the body is doing through the immune system. The immune system learns about what the gut is doing through the microbiome. But then the immune system takes that information all the way through the rest of the body up to the brain and talks to the immune system in the brain. So these cells called glial cells. So just that communication between the microbiome and the brain cells, that can signal in your body a signal of well-being or a signal of not well-being. And so we've been able to show that if we can prime your immune system naturally with things like yeast extracts and mushroom extracts and things like that, that you will feel better. Not only will your immune system be stronger, so you're less likely to have an allergy or have a cold, like upper respiratory tract infection. So the shield part of it is better, but the signaling part of it is better. And as a result of that, you just feel better.
I love that. You talk about in the book that this gut brain signaling, sometimes it's like a game of telephone where when it gets from the brain, by the time it gets to the gut, it's gone through 7 iterations of what it should have been. And if you can make that more like high fiber, it's like 5G, whatever it is right now,
yeah,
make it the best signaling. And it's we overcomplicate the solutions. Like, I am blown away by the benefits that you can get from this one beverage. Like, to show up better for yourself, but have your body work better, because I'll come back to what you have continually said. Like, if we can help ourselves and others feel better, you show up on the daily making better choices.
Right. And that compounds itself, right? You have a better day today. You're going to have a better day tomorrow, and a better day and a better day. And it's not to say that like it's all, rainbows and butterflies and stuff.
No.
But like on average, you're going to be more effective and more impactful in everything that you're doing.
100%. This conversation is so amazing. Thank you so much for unpacking all of this. You guys, I will link all of the things in the show notes. If you want to learn more about this beverage, go to my website at stanalewis.com/happy juice. And you can learn about all the things that it is and is not. If you have a question, reach out. You can DM me on Instagram at Miss Dana Lewis. I would love to answer your questions. Thank you, Dr. Shawn. This has been so informative. Can't wait to chat with you. Until next time.
Anytime. Yeah, let's do it again. I love our chats.
Yes. Have an awesome day. Thank you guys for tuning in, and make today a day that you stop faking fine and show up for yourself, because the world needs the best version of you, not the tired, bloated, crabby version. And we're here to partner with you and let her shine.